Thank you all. What a great turnout. Right here. Good. Great. Thank you very much. It's really great to see so many folks from the neighborhood and from across town to be here for this important set of announcements and discussion. You know, Sunday marked the 54th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, when our colleague John Lewis was leading people across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and suffered a brutal beating for his advocacy for just the right to vote. Well, now we know here in Texas that it doesn't take a brutal baton to stop people from voting and to interfere with their right to vote. One way is to just use a more subtle method of purging the voter rolls. And we have seen from the Abbott administration a false claim that tens of thousands of Texans were voting illegally. In our state, the real problem has never been that there were too many voting wrongfully. It's just that not enough people were voting at all. And one obstacle after another has been raised to keep people from exercising their fundamental democratic rights. Today, we are focusing on broad and bold election reforms that are encompassed in something called the For the People Act. It's House Resolution number 1, and it's number 1 in our priorities. We believe that the focus needs to be on bringing more people to vote, not driving them away, not throwing them off the voter rolls. The Texas Republicans have enacted the worst, most stringent voter ID law to discourage voting. And I can speak with some undesired personal experience that we have more partisan gerrymandering than any other place in the country. As you know, Austin is the largest city, any place in America, that does not have a majority of its citizens within one congressional district. And we're not the only city. Almost every Texas city has been impacted. I think of San Marcos, just down I-35, split into 3 pieces. As far as the voter rolls are concerned, you want this turned on?
You can hold it.
Okay, fine. As far as the question of the voter rolls, every carpenter knows the rule, measure twice, cut once. But Attorney General Paxton, our indicted Attorney General, has a different approach, and it is cut, cut, cut. Thankfully, and we're about to hear about this, some great civil rights advocates here in this state went to federal court, and Judge Fred Berry told them that the order would be entered preventing Greg Abbott and his Secretary of State from removing voters from the rolls without judicial pre-approval. As he said in his order, the actions of the Abbott administration were ham-handed, and the action, quote, exemplifies the power of government to strike fear and anxiety and to intimidate the least powerful among us. Instead of the purge, what we need is an urge of Texas voters to turn out and vote by removing the obstacles in their way. The For the People Act, in short, represents protection from voter purges, automatic voter registration, longer early voting, House redistricting concluded or adopted through independent commissions like California, strengthening election integrity, defense of our democracy from the ongoing siege of dark money, and another provision just added on which I personally worked, requiring the disclosure for all presidential candidates, including the current incumbent, for 10 years to produce their tax returns both individually and for their businesses. Before we hear from the Speaker, we're fortunate to be joined by 2 leaders in the fight for democracy in our state. Julieta Garibay is the Texas director and co-founder of United We Dream. It's the largest immigrant youth-led program in the country. Absolutely. I always say that we're so fortunate in this community to attract the best and brightest from all over the world. Julieta came here from Mexico City. She earned her master's in public health at the University of Texas. She co-founded the University Leadership Initiative, a group for undocumented youth to express their rights. and she is the lead plaintiff in the successful lawsuit that I referred to that accuses state officials of illegally targeting those who are foreign-born. Let's hear from her about her work. Julieta.
Thank you so much, Congressman Doggett and Speaker Pelosi. It's an honor to be here. My name is Julieta Garibay. I'm a U.S. citizen and Texas resident, and I'm one of the close to 100,000 Texan voters affected by Texas Secretary Whitley, Attorney General Paxton, and Governor Abbott's attempt to purge our vote this past month. Whitley, Paxton, and Abbott sounded a false alarm of voter fraud with the sole purpose of not only trampling over my rights as a U.S. citizen, but of intimidating foreign-born naturalized citizens like me from exercising our rightful duty to go and vote. I stand in strong support of H.R.1. H.R.1 is essential for the democracy of our country, for me, and for our beautiful state of Texas, to ensure that our voice and our vote is counted. I migrated to Austin, Texas with my beautiful mother and my sister more than 27 years ago. For more than 2 decades, I was undocumented and lived with emergency plans. Plans in case La Migra or immigration agents got me. I was able to adjust my status through what's called Violence Against Women Act as a survivor of domestic violence. I took my naturalization oath in April of 2018, and I proudly voted on May of 2018. At the polls, I thought of the immigrant community who were counting on my vote to ensure that we're treating with dignity and respect, not only for the immigrant youth or dreamers, who some still call us as dreamers, but for the people who risk their lives to come to the U.S., for the people who worry daily about being detained and being separated from their loved ones, for the people who are criminalized, dehumanized, detained, and incarcerated for the sole purpose of wanting to have a better life in this country. Let me be clear. If Whitley, Paxton, and Abbott will go to the lengths to suppress my vote, the Latino vote, the vote of people of color, I will not only support H.R.1, I will continue to door knock, I will continue to talk to my community to make sure that we exercise our right to vote. I am Julieta Garibay. I am one of the leading plaintiffs against Paxton, Abbott, and Whitley, against the voter purge. We will not stand back. Our vote will not be silenced because, as Speaker Pelosi said, Texas, we know our power. Me llamo Julieta Garibay, orgullosamente nacida en México. Migré con mi mamá y mi hermana, más de 27 años, y soy sobreviviente de violencia doméstica. Pude arreglar mi estatus inmigratorio y me hice ciudadana en el abril de 2018. Soy una de las casi 100,000 personas de Texas quienes fuimos víctimas del intento del secretario estatal Whitley, del procurador general Paxton y del gobernador Abbott de tratar de suprimir nuestro voto. Ellos falsamente dijeron que cometimos fraude de voto, con la única meta de suprimir nuestro voto. Hoy estoy aquí, pues nuestro Estado y nuestro país y nuestra democracia necesita H.R.1 para asegurarnos que nuestra voz y nuestra vota sean contados. Texas, no rechacemos nuestro poder de hacer el cambio por nuestra comunidad inmigrante. No dejemos ser intimidados. Es nuestro deber y nuestro derecho salir a votar por nuestra gente.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you. Fantastic. That's what it's all about. Thank you. Thank you so much. No wonder we won. We also won because we had great advocates in this lawsuit. The Texas Civil Rights Project has been out there in so many areas, protecting those when the administration came in to tear mothers away from their children, actively involved on the border for dealing with issues concerning our schools. Last year, the fact that people were being denied the opportunity to vote in Houston, they were there to see that hours were extended, that Bobcats down the street got an opportunity to vote early additional day. Mimi Marziani is a tremendous leader at the Texas Civil Rights Project, and want her to add a few words about this lawsuit.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Mimi Marziani. I'm the president of the Texas Civil Rights Project. I see a lot of familiar faces in this crowd, but I'll still explain a little bit about who we are. We are Texas lawyers for Texas communities. We serve the movement in this state for equality and justice, and we fight to ensure that everybody can live with dignity, justice, and without fear. So dignity includes having a voice in the decisions that affect our lives today and the lives of our children tomorrow. Our right to vote is our most important tool for making our voices heard and holding those in charge accountable. Plus, in a place as big, vibrant, and opinionated as Texas, our democracy is strongest when every single person participates. Unfortunately, the leaders of our state do not want to hear what you and I have to say. They're afraid. And so in a naked attempt to preserve their own power, Texas officials have imposed a variety of tactics to shut out voters, especially folks who have been cast aside historically, persons of color, young people, those without means. So what does it look like when politicians try to pick their voters rather than the other way around? Let me give you just a couple of examples. First, it's a crime to register your neighbor to vote in Texas without advance permission from the state. Freedom Summer would be illegal in this state. Second, last year, prosecutors pressed charges against Crystal Mason, a woman of color and a mom of three, for mistakenly casting a provisional ballot while serving the tail end of a felony conviction. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, even though she was told by election workers that she could vote, and even though that vote never counted. Third, despite a state law giving high school students the right to register to vote at their schools, state officials refused to enforce it. And TCRP's 2018 compliance report showed that because of this refusal, nearly 200,000 young people are shut out of the system on an annual basis. And then finally, just 1 month ago, David Whitley, the current Secretary of State, targeted tens of thousands of naturalized citizens who had registered to vote. He tried to purge them from the rolls. Whitley knew from the start that his data was unreliable, but that didn't stop him from publicly and falsely accusing these voters of committing crimes. And this was an accusation that was repeated not just by the Attorney General of Texas, but by the President of the United States. So on top of discrimination itself, this act has been used, weaponized, to try to intimidate voters of color and try to justify a radical anti-voter agenda. Thankfully, a federal judge in the litigation we brought against Whitley has called him out for his actions. He's likened him to a child who refuses to take responsibility. But still,
President like that.
But still, David Whitley maintains the support of the governor and other state leaders who are egging him on and supporting his confirmation at the expense of all of us, at the expense of the voters, at the expense of our democracy. And so I thank you, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and our hometown Congressman Lloyd Doggett, for coming to the heart of Texas to see and hear exactly why bold solutions are necessary to ensure that all of our voices are heard. The We the People Act is a robust, progressive step forward to bring our elections and our democracy to the 21st century, even in Texas. For instance, imagine what automatic voter registration would do for our state, which constantly boosts some of the lowest registration rates in the country. I can tell you from experience that this provision alone would help us transform Texas's archaic, paper-based, and discriminatory system and help us ensure that Texas voters look and sound like all of Texas. So one last thing. Despite the efforts of state leaders, I believe that a voting rights movement is rising across the country and in this state. And so together, with leadership from Washington, leadership from Speaker Pelosi, from Congressman Doggett, and because of the hope, grit, and hard work of so many people in this room, I believe that we will take back our democracy for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you very much. So I'm not going to begin to try to introduce everyone here, but I see sitting next to my granddaughter, Clara Williams, who had her first protest sign at the Women's March 2 years ago. One of the leaders in that effort, and our host this morning, along with Ed Espinosa, and that's Wendy Davis, who's doing so much to empower young women across this state. And also, Justin, I want to recognize you, Justin Nelson, as an advocate on these issues. You want to add just a quick word about the issues involved here?
Sure. I'm proud to be here in support of the For the People Act. The For the People Act would be and will be the most important piece of voting legislation since the great president from the state of Texas, Lyndon Baines Johnson, passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And we in Texas know the importance of the right to vote. The issues in the For the People Act, they're not Republican issues, they're not Democratic issues, they are issues that go to the integrity of our system and to our democracy itself. And in Texas, when we have the indicted Attorney General, who himself is indicted for fraud, raising false claims of voter fraud to take out tens of thousands of voters, it shows how much this system needs to be reformed. And there's one other piece, there's so many pieces of the For the People Act, but one other piece that I've talked a lot about, it's so important, and I talk about it in my nonprofit as well, it's the end of partisan gerrymandering. Congressman Doggett has a district that stretches all the way from Austin to San Antonio. Austin, as Congressman Doggett mentioned, has no representative of its own. I live on the side of one district, except for every Friday morning my garbage cans are in another district in the middle. And it's wrong, and we can do so much better. So I'm so proud to endorse this act and be here for people who are standing up for democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, thank you so much. And now the individual you really all came to hear from. You know, you may have noticed that we Democrats don't always get along on every issue. We disagree, and to get everybody together, united, to show our power, whether it is standing up to our indicted Attorney General to protect pre-existing conditions in health care, getting for the first time in decades meaningful gun safety legislation with the background check we approved, or the willingness to stand up to a bully on an emergency order that is a fake. We have had a leader who could bring us together, work through our differences, and come out with a stronger agenda, because we don't always start from the same place, but we end up committed to the same values. So a person who brings grit and grace to the Speaker's office and the ability for us to win and the right values, our Speaker, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lloyd Doggett. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Lloyd Doggett, for your kind words of introduction, for the invitation to be here today, for your extraordinary leadership in the Congress of the United States. I've had the privilege of seeing Lloyd in action when he was in the State Senate, in the Supreme Court here, and now up close and personal with him and Libby in Washington, D.C. as a true team. And it's great that Clara is here, his granddaughter, remember when she was born. I thank you for continuing the interest of your family in public service, as well as Ella, whom I met last night. It's about the future. It's all about the future. Lloyd has been a champion on so many issues, and I'll mention them as we go along. But I thank you for sending him to the Congress of the United States. He is a champion for the people. And an honor to be here with Julieta and Mimi. Weren't they magnificent in their presentation, the clarity? And Justin, thank you for your words and your courage to run in a situation that is, we cannot, there's one word that describes what Julieta was talking about, what Mimi was talking about, what Lloyd is all about, and that is about respect. Respect for every person, respect for the Constitution of the United States. In this campaign, we had an agenda for the people. Lower health care costs by lowering the cost of prescription drugs. Increase paychecks by building the infrastructure of America in a green way. And H.R.1 for the people. And those are all connected. The for the people is essential to the other two, so that the public has the confidence that we will be able to act without the influence of big, dark money and distortions in the election caused by the voter suppression that is out there. As Congressman Mr. Chairman now of the Health Subcommittee and the Ways and Means Committee, I said there was lots of sacrifice that went into getting voting rights, and as Justin said, it's about a law that was passed by a Texas President, Lyndon Johnson. And part of H.R.1 is to pass again, to lay the foundation to pass the Voting Rights Act, strengthened after the actions of the Supreme Court, which significantly weakened it. So H.R.1 is of itself important, but the foundation that it lays, the constitutional basis and hearings and the rest on how we go forward. But this is part of something that we have to address, is the cynicism of the American people. Voter suppression on the part of the Republicans is well known and well documented in our country, and thank you for documenting it here. It must stop. But one of the big suppressors of the vote is the influence of dark, special interest money suffocating the airwaves with a message that is not true, but turns people off because of the confusion it creates. And that's why H.R.1 is important as well, to end voter suppression, to lay the foundation to pass H.R. 4, which is the Voting Rights Act, the restoration of the Voting Rights Act, but also to empower small donors by matching grants and the rest along the way. And I asked them to bring you this in. Automatic voter registration promotes online registration, same-day voter registration, reaffirms commitment to restoring Voting Rights Act, prohibits voter roll purges, clarifies that states' failure to vote is not grounds for removing registered voters from the rolls, as was done in Ohio, Georgia, and elsewhere. Democracy restores voting rights, as I mentioned, paper ballots, it goes on. But here's the thing, this is within the context of the president having what I view as an unconstitutional declaration that, thank you, Joaquin Castro of Texas has put forth the legislation that overturns that, defying the Constitution. The President of the United States, we take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, which contains a separation of powers in there, checks and balances, co-equal branches of government, and the President is defying that, and the Congress is saying no, and the Senate will say no too. We will fight them in the Congress, in the courts, in the court of public opinion on that subject. That's our oath of office. But also this administration is trying to jeopardize who we are as a nation by making citizenship a question on the census rolls. We cannot let that stand. So this is all part of a whole picture, you see, of undermining the Constitution of the United States, which says every 10 years there will be a census of the people. It doesn't say registered voters or anything like that. And Congress has a role in how that happens, and we are asserting our role in that regard. But see all of this in the context. I say to them sometimes, when you leave this earth and go to heaven and meet our founders, are you going to say to them, I did everything in my power to suppress the vote? Because that is what you are doing. That is what you are doing, affecting by the census what happens in redistricting and reapportionment through the country, but not only that, delivery of service. So when you hear Julieta talk about the fact that she is a victim of the actions taken by the Secretary of State and so many other people as well, well, that only shows, more importantly, the need for H.R.1. And I want to thank our friends in labor who are here, Indivisible who are so many people who helped us win this election, not to get partisan in it, but to win the election to have leverage against these unconstitutional actions that are being taken by some in power in this state and certainly nationally as well. So thank all of you for your patriotism, because this is in respect for our Constitution, respect for people who are here, and respect for the fact that we are a nation that is so diverse and beautiful, and not to fear that, but to embrace that. And that is what, I guess it must be their fear, that is saying more than that commitment to what our founders intended, but our Constitution requires, what the Voting Rights Act spelled out, what the American people expect and deserve. You want us to be, handmaidens has different meanings now than it used to be. Handmaidens to a special interest. So again, this is about instilling the confidence of the American people in the political process, in what happens in government, that it's the people's interests that are being served, not the dark special interest of that dark special interest money that is coming in. So it's pretty exciting. It is a moment. The actions taken here in Texas are crossing a threshold of saying no to what is happening here, but saying yes to what the vision was of our founders of a democracy. So again, thank you for your patriotism. Now let me just talk about Lloyd for a second, because I talked about our...
Well, take your time.
Julieta, thank you for your courage, because it takes courage to do what you do. Next week, I talked about the three things. Lower health care costs by lowering cost of prescription drugs. Who's our champion in the Congress on that subject? Lloyd Doggett. Requiring the president to reveal his taxes, not only him, but future candidates as well. Lloyd Doggett. Thank you, Lloyd Doggett, for that. For these and so many reasons, he is respected by our colleagues. His judgment is highly regarded, and his leadership highly respected. I know you know that here. I just want you to know the esteem in which he is held in the Congress of the United States. Thank you for sending Lloyd Doggett to Congress. I mentioned that about good-paying jobs and the rest, but also what we said during the campaign is we are going to pass legislation to protect our dreamers, and including in that temporary protected status for people who deserve it. And we will be launching that next week. We said in the campaign we're going to pass common sense background check legislation, which will save an initiative in gun safety that will save the most lives, and we did that in the House of Representatives as well. We said we were going to pass the Equality Act to end discrimination against LGBTQ community, which is again part of respect for everyone in our country. We'll be rolling that out. And when we talk about bigger paychecks, we're going to have equal pay for equal work. We've already rolled it out. We'll pass the bill in a few weeks ahead. So by the time we're there 100 days, we will have had a record of legislative accomplishment. Now, to get it all into law requires us to make some of these issues too hot to handle in the public domain. So Friends in Labor, Grassroots, Indivisible, all the groups had 10,000 events to protect the Affordable Care Act. So the grassroots knows its power, weighs in, shows up, press events, district office events, press conferences, and the rest along the way to say, we know what's happening, we know what's in our interest. We want everyone in Congress to know that we see what the vote is, and we expect H.R.1 to pass in the Senate. We expect gun safety to pass in the Senate, the Equality Act, protecting our dreamers and the rest, because the public is there on these issues. But again, coming back to the voice is our vote. Our vote is our voice, back and forth. This is protecting the vote is fundamental to protecting our democracy. So all of the good things that we want to happen, that there is public support for. President, Mr. Doggett's tired of hearing me say this, President Lincoln said it so well. Public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. But we want public sentiment to be heard at the ballot box and in terms of what is happening in Congress. That's why we promise an open and transparent government. Since we talked about immigration a bit, I just want to say this one more thing. In the campaign, the president that I quoted the most was Ronald Reagan. That surprised you maybe. But Ronald Reagan said this. This is the last speech I will make as President of the United States. And I have a message I want to communicate to the country I love. He went on to talk about the Statue of Liberty and what it means to the world, that beacon of hope, what it means to people who've come here and seen that statue, welcoming them. He said our ancestors, our grandparents, our parents. We in California see people coming from a different direction, but the same welcome. You see them coming from this, many from the southern border, but should be the same welcome. He went on to say, though, after talking about the Statue of Liberty, the vital force of America's preeminence in the world is every new generation of immigrants who come to our country. And when America fails to recognize that as our vital force, America will fail to be preeminent in the world. So when we talk about newcomers, we have to recognize the constant reinvigoration of America that they are, that we all have been, our families, and that, unless you're blessed to be Native American, which is a blessing in itself that we respect, but that constant reinvigoration of hope, determination, optimism, courage to make the future better for the next generation, those are American traits, and these newcomers make America more American. And we want them, when they come here, to be fully part of our system, and that means not suppressing the vote of our newcomers to America. So thank you, Julieta, for your courage. Thank you, Mimi, for your strength in taking this to the courts and to the public on this subject. And thank all of you for your interest in this. Again, whether it's protecting our newcomers, protecting the right to vote, fighting them on the census, overturning the president's undermining of the Constitution, this is all our patriotic duty. So thank all of you for your patriotism, and thanks again to Lloyd Doggett for putting us together.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.